Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. We're stepping into the creaking shoes of a plague survivor, not a doctor, not a king, just someone trying to stay very much alive in a world that smells like smoke, onions, and existential dread. You're not in a hospital or some antiseptic time travel pod. Nope. You wake up in a room with three walls, a slanted roof made of thatch and regret, and something wet dripping on your forehead that you really hope is just condensation. Spoiler, it's not. You live in a world where simply existing could get you accused of bringing disease. And smelling too healthy? That's suspicious. You probably won't survive this. But hey, let's see how far you make it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up in a narrow cot next to a dying fire and a living chicken. You didn't invite the chicken. It just lives here now. The room smells of sweat, damp wood, and something acrid from the street. Outside, the village bell rings once. It's not a time signal. It means someone died. Again. Probably not someone you liked, but still. Not a great way to start the day. You stretch, but stop halfway when your elbow grazes a wall that squishes slightly. Moisture, fungus, emotional trauma? You don't ask. You just rise slowly. Your joints crack because nutrition hasn't been a thing in several months. You slept in your clothes because changing is a luxury. And bathing, well, let's just say there's a reason you don't smell too clean. See, in these times, there are rules. Unspoken, unofficial, but sacred among those who want to keep breathing. And the first one is this: don't smell too healthy. It might seem silly, but the odor of health, that soapy, herby, suspiciously blessed smell, paints a target on your back. People think it means you have secret remedies, that you've made a pact with a wandering apothecary, that you're hiding tinctures blessed by St. Roderick of the Lavender Elbow. In other words, you must be a witch, or worse, a hoarder. The local watchers, a group of amateur enforcers who take breaks from farming just to sniff people, will notice. They'll talk. Then the neighbors will start asking why your household hasn't had any deaths, why your goats still have their tails, why you're upright, while others are horizontal and leaking. You once made the mistake of dabbing rosemary oil behind your ears. A friend said it kept bad humors away. It also kept friends away. A boy in town started calling you Rose Boy. He disappeared 2 days later. People still blame you. Historians still argue whether plague-era communities truly believed in olfactory suspicion, or if it was just a way to explain away randomness and fear. Either way, if you smell like lavender, you'd better also smell like desperation. So here's what you do. You rub ash under your armpits, not because it helps, but because it doesn't. You roll in straw. You take off your shoes and walk through a puddle of something that may have once been soup or a deeply distressed ferret. And when you walk outside, you embrace the stench. It is your armor, your unwashed hair, your stained tunic, your breath that could strip paint. They keep you safe. You pass the baker's window. He's long gone, but his apprentice still works the oven. You give a nod. He squints at you like he's trying to smell your intent. You shuffle along, keeping your shoulders hunched, your gait uneven. Healthy people walk straight. You? You walk like someone who's 3 bad dreams away from collapse. A woman on the corner sells onions. Just onions. She used to sell flowers. That stopped when people began associating flowers with funerals. Onions, however, are safe, pungent, repulsive in the right way. You buy two. Not to eat, obviously. You can't afford that luxury. No, you tie them to your belt. Let them swing. Let them rot. Let them whisper to the world, I am as diseased as you, my friend. Further down, someone coughs. Everyone freezes. That's another rule, actually, but we'll get to it later. You pass by a group of children jumping over puddles. One falls. Everyone gasps, but she laughs. So it's probably not a death puddle. Probably. You reach the apothecary's door. It's not a shop anymore. It's a suggestion. A sign painted in smudged ink reads, Cures within, questions not welcome. You knock twice, then once again, a code. Because buying too many herbs makes people nervous, but not buying any makes them suspicious. Inside, the air smells like vinegar and denial. He eyes you. He notices the onions, the ash, the limp. You're playing your part. He hands you a sachet of dried summing. You don't ask. He doesn't explain. You give him half a coin and two prayers. You stuff it in your shirt, close to your heart, where only the bravest rats dare tread. It'll mix with the sweat and despair. Perfect camouflage. Outside again, the air feels heavier. Another bell. That's two today. Before lunch, you avoid eye contact with a man standing too still in an alley. Either he's dead or contemplating the economic burden of funerals. You move on. And here's the thing. In plague times, you don't just avoid death, you audition for survival. Every day is a performance. You fake coughing when people look too hopeful. You grimace when someone says, You're looking well. You lie, beautifully and often. Because if you're too healthy, you're suspicious. And if you're too sick, you're already buried. So you thread the needle. You act unwell enough to seem harmless, but not so ill that someone calls the watchers to cart you away. It's exhausting. You get home. The chicken is sitting on your cot. You let her. She's the only one who doesn't expect anything from you, except maybe your crust of bread. You lie down beside her. The sachet scratches your ribs. Your onions rot quietly. Outside, the bell rings again. 3 today. You close your eyes and try to smell a little more average. You wake up to the sound of something chewing. Not in a romantic, cozy fireside snack kind of way. This is a frantic, wet, rodent-style chew, the kind that echoes inside wooden floorboards and rattles your spine like a distant omen. You roll over to see your last piece of cheese has been nibbled to a wedge the size of a regret. Rule number 2, hide your cheese. Always. Cheese is not just food during plague times. It is currency, medicine, emotional support, and apparently a rat magnet. The cheese you saved from last week, the one you nearly bartered a boot for, is now mostly tiny teeth marks and bacteria. You stare at it like it's betrayed you personally, because it has. Let's rewind. In normal times, cheese is just cheese. But now it's practically sacred. People believe cheese strengthens the blood, that it can stop the bad air from entering your organs. One old woman even claimed that blue cheese whispered secrets about plague, immunity, if you slept with it under your armpit. You didn't try that. You're not that desperate. Yet, historians still argue whether dairy actually provided any immune benefits during medieval pandemics, or whether it was just one of those things that didn't kill you immediately, and thus Ogias got labeled as healing. Either way, cheese became a kind of miracle food. If you had it, you didn't flaunt it. You didn't slice it in front of company. and you certainly didn't eat it in public unless you were ready to wrestle a widow for it. You glance over at your cheese pouch, which is, of course, made of linen and desperation. You had tried the hanging from the rafters trick, tying the pouch with a bit of string. Turns out the rats in your town have acrobatic training, possibly a union. So now you've resorted to hiding it where no one dares look, inside a broken chamber pot. It's not dignified, but dignity doesn't spread on bread. Except you don't have bread. Bread is for those who can risk going to market or who know how to work a bribe in 5 syllables, which you do, to be fair, but you used up all your favor on onions last week. You chew the remaining crumb of cheese slowly, reverently, like it's communion for the chronically unlucky. Your neighbor Thaddeus once had a whole wheel of goat cheese, huge, beautiful, practically round poetry, he told one person. The next morning, the cheese was gone, and Thaddeus was being doused in vinegar by a group of angry locals who thought hoarding cheese meant you'd struck a deal with the plague fairies. He's fine now. Well, alive, mostly. So now you say things like, I haven't had cheese in weeks, and remember cheese? That was a good dream. While quietly stroking the crusty corner you're saving for midweek morale. You head out for a walk, but only after you stuff your pouch into a bag of laundry and bury that inside a pile of firewood. You tie 3 knots in the cloth. Not because it's safer, but because it makes you feel like you're doing something. You walk through the alley, avoiding eye contact and passing the baker's assistant again. He looks at you. You nod. The universal medieval signal for I too am barely holding it together. He doesn't nod back. Now that could mean anything. Suspicion, fear, constipation. The point is, don't give him a reason to wonder if you're hiding food, especially the dairy kind. You cough lightly just in case. It helps maintain the illusion that you're not someone with calories to spare. Someone calls from a window. An old woman. She's offering to trade herbs for eggs. You don't have eggs, but you do have cheese, and briefly, so briefly, you consider it. You could swap a sliver for a few sage leaves, maybe some thyme, and hope that no one hears about it. But then you remember what happened to Harold. Ah, Harold. Sweet, foolish, slightly smug Harold, who once traded cheese openly in the square like he was hosting a farmer's market. He didn't even hide it. He cut slices, used a knife. People gasped. 2 days later, his house was painted with tar, marked with the plague sign, and Harold had to flee to the forest. The forest, where everything either bites, stings, or judges you silently with glowing eyes. So no, you don't trade. You nod politely, hold your stomach like it's empty, and say something dramatic like, if only I'd kept that goat alive. You head toward the market square, which today is less of a market and more of a rumor exchange. People don't sell openly anymore. They linger, whisper, exchange glances. You spot a man holding what looks like a round wheel under his coat. Cheese? You look away. You can't afford to know. Instead, you pick up a rock, toss it casually, and mutter something about how the rats are winning. People nod. Everyone agrees. Rats are winning. You pass by the apothecary again. His door's closed. That's not good. Either he's out of supplies or too dead to open the door. Both options are deeply inconvenient. Back home, the chicken has laid an egg. You blink. You haven't seen an egg in weeks. You thank her awkwardly. Then, in a gesture both generous and wildly irrational, you consider putting the egg next to your cheese stash. But that's too much power in one spot. You hide the egg in your boot instead. You'll walk weird, but you already do. Dinner is what you can scrounge: a carrot stub, half an onion, and the joyless remains of yesterday's broth. You chew slowly, pretending it tastes like cheese. It doesn't. Before bed, you unwrap your stash, not to eat it, just to look. A tiny wedge, slightly green. Maybe basil? Probably mold. You sniff it. You smile. For a moment, you feel rich, important, like someone who has things. Then you wrap it again. You tuck it under the floorboard. You place a rock on top, then a brick on top of the rock, then a chair, then the chicken. Because rule number 2 never changes. Hide your cheese, always. You wake up coughing. Not because you're sick, although who isn't really, but because your ceiling has decided to shed a generous helping of soot directly into your lungs. You sit up, blinking through dust and morning confusion, and realize something deeply important. It's cold, which is weird, because the sun's been up for hours, and this place usually runs on one of 2 temperatures: swampy and plague sauna. But today, there's a chill. A good omen? Hard no, because cold air means drafts, and drafts mean air movement. And air movement, according to your local superstition council, i.e., the drunk guy with the hat, means miasma, that invisible, evil smelling fog that carries death straight into your lungs like a grim delivery man with no concept of personal boundaries. So you do the only rational thing. You throw another piece of damp firewood on your tiny, wheezing hearth and grab a bundle of herbs to toss in. Not for scent. No one's sniffing lavender romantically these days, but because smoke is safety. That's rule number 3. Sleep near smoke, not windows. Historians still debate whether smoke truly had any protective effect against the plague, but in the minds of your neighbors and your anxious inner monologue, burning things, especially sweet-smelling things, forms an aromatic force field. Windows, meanwhile, are traitors. They let in breezes. Breezes are basically death's whispers. You shuffle over to the window. No glass, of course, just a square hole with a bit of cloth nailed to it. You yank the cloth closed, pin it down with a pot lid, and spit once for good measure. That's not part of the ritual. You're just annoyed. You wrap yourself in your cloak. It's scratchy and smells like wet rope, but it's better than a breeze to the neck. And now you must decide, do you open the door to let in fresh air and possibly ghosts? Or do you stay inside and marinate in carbon monoxide and anxiety? You crack the door open 1 inch and peer out. Bad idea. A child is running past with what looks like a live squirrel tied to a stick. He's laughing. The squirrel is not. Behind him, smoke wafts from a neighbor's chimney. You sigh with relief. Everyone's burning things this morning. Good. That means fewer smells drifting your way from the, let's call it, communal expiration site. You throw another handful of dried juniper onto the fire. It pops loudly. You whisper an apology to the chicken. She hates sudden noises and recently pecked your toe for disrespecting her space. As you stir your morning broth, if you can call lukewarm water with hints of leek broth, you keep close to the hearth. The smoke curls around your face, warm, bitter, comforting in that strange, I'm definitely inhaling ash but feeling safe kind of way. You breathe shallow. Everyone says the key is to breathe through your mouth, but also through a cloth, and only while squinting. That last part is debated. You do it anyway. This is your routine now. Every morning. Smoke before sun. And never ever near a window. You think back to old Clara. Sweet woman. Kept a lovely home with curtains she embroidered herself. Left her windows open for natural light. Claimed It helped her potted herbs grow. She got sick in a week. The doctor said it was humors. The neighbors said it was breeze demons. You say nothing, but now her curtains hang in the chapel, covering a crack in the wall. Her herbs died with her, probably out of loyalty, and yet some still swear by air. There's a school of thought, mostly by traveling monks with suspiciously good teeth, that fresh air is the answer. They say the plague is stagnant, foul, and smoke just hides the smell without removing the danger. One even shouted, "Let in the light, not the fear," before being tackled by villagers wielding broomsticks and a ladle. You're not convinced. Light's nice, but smoke is warm, so you go outside only after the fire is burning strong. You smell like a smoked ham. Your neighbors nod approvingly. No one likes a breeze breaker. You pass by Martha's house. Her roof is gone, but she's still burning rosemary in a dented cauldron. The dedication is inspiring, or unhinged. Hard to tell these days. A boy runs by you holding a flaming stick. "It keeps them away," he screams. You don't ask who them is. You just step aside. Down the street, a woman sneezes. Everyone panics. Then, someone throws a pinch of dried thyme into the air and shouts, "Smoke for safety," like it's a battle cry. Everyone cheers. You add a mental note, "Bring more thyme next time." It works better than reason. You return home before the wind changes. Inside, the air is thick. You pretend it's protective. The chicken agrees. She's nesting in the warmest corner, her feathers puffed out like she's hosting a sauna retreat. You eat your lunch, smoke-flavored root vegetable, possibly turnip, possibly old potato. You don't ask, you just chew. You stare into the fire as it dies down. You consider opening the window for air. You don't. Instead, you add another twig, just in case. Because in this world, clean air is a gamble. But smoke? Smoke is strategy. You're walking home, minding your own business, enjoying the scent of damp ash and mild panic when you hear it. A bell. Not the church bell. Not the market bell. No, this one's smaller, closer, sharper. A clink-clink rhythm that raises the tiny hairs on your unwashed arms and makes your stomach attempt a subtle U-turn. You freeze, because you know exactly what that sound means. Rule number 4. If you hear bells, run. Not gallop screaming. Through the streets run, obviously. That attracts attention. And attention is something only fools and corpse collectors invite. No, this is more of a controlled panic shuffle. A casual pivot into the shadows. A duck behind a rain barrel. Anything but standing there like you've never read a single plague survival pamphlet. Which, technically, you haven't. But you've heard the stories. Everyone has. The bell is attached to a person. A very specific person. A man or woman dressed in long robes, sometimes patched with symbols, sometimes smeared with herbs, always looking like they lost a bet with a god of sanitation. On their face, a mask. The beak-like one. You know the kind. It was meant to ward off the plague with sweet smells, stuffed with rose petals, cloves, and the last hopes of whoever made it. The mask doesn't work. But the bell, it warns. It says, "I am coming. I carry the plague, or I clean up after it. Either way, you should not be here." Historians still argue about whether plague bell carriers were medical workers, undertakers, or simply very dramatic volunteers. But in your town, they are known as plague walkers, and their job is simple: carry away the bodies and ring the bell so the living can hide in time. The bell gets closer. You dart into the alley, heart thudding like it's auditioning for its own funeral. You crouch low. behind a barrel that's only mostly leaking. Across the street, the figure walks by. Robe? Check. Mask? Long and terrifying. Gloves? Yes, but too small. You can see fingers poking through like the plague wanted a better grip. They're pushing a cart. You can't see what's inside, but you hear it. The soft shuffle of something that used to breathe. The occasional thud as the cart wobbles over a cobblestone. You hold your breath. The bell rings again. Clink, clink, and then they pass. You stay crouched for another full minute, just in case they forgot something and come back. It's happened before. You once saw one stop, sniff the air like a hound, and point to a closed shutter. 2 days later, that house was empty. Eventually you stand. Across the alley, a woman peeks from behind her curtain. She sees you. You exchange the look. The "I'm still here" nod. She nods back, then quickly closes the curtain. You walk the long way home, past the tannery, past the abandoned shoe stall, past the wishing well that now mostly gets spat in. You hum a little tune under your breath, not for joy, but because people believe it helps keep bad air from settling in your throat. And besides, you need noise to drown out the bell still ringing in your ears. You think back to poor William, a sweet man, terrible balance. He didn't hear the bell in time, walked right into the plague walker's path. He tripped, fell into the cart, screamed, came out covered in a blanket that wasn't his. People still argue whether he ever really recovered. Not physically. He didn't get sick, oddly. But mentally? William doesn't speak anymore. He just mutters about eyes inside the mask. Not metaphorical ones. Literal ones. That blink. You shake the thought away. At home, you throw 3 herbs onto your fire and light a sprig of sage by the door. You pour a bit of vinegar on the threshold and mutter a line you half remember from a traveling priest. Something about sanctifying entrances. It probably doesn't work, but it definitely doesn't hurt. You boil water for tea, or something pretending to be tea. It smells like boiled weeds. You drink it anyway. While you sip, you keep one ear tuned to the street, because sometimes they come back, sometimes they knock, and sometimes, on days you try not to think about, they don't ring the bell at all. You remember what a man once said in the market, before the market died: "If the bell rings, you're lucky. It means you still have time to run." You nodded, then asked what to do if you heard 2 bells at once. He just laughed. Not a fun laugh. More of a good luck, peasant kind of chuckle. The fire crackles. The tea cools. You check the window for the 5th time. No bell. For now. And still, you sleep with one ear open and one shoe on. Just in case. Because when the bell rings, it doesn't ask permission. It just comes. You wake to the sound of purring, but you don't own a cat. Your eyes snap open, and there, curled on your chest like a furry judgment, is a large, smug tabby with eyes like boiled peas and the confidence of a duke. It stares at you, purrs louder, kicks a bit of ash off the hearth with its tail, just because it can. Your heart lurches, not from surprise, but from the immediate awareness that, by letting this cat near you, you have either invited divine protection or signed a death warrant. Because rule number 5 is confusing, contradictory, and wildly dependent on local politics and weather patterns. Your cat might save you or get you killed. In this town, cats are caught in a centuries-old tug-of-war between holy symbolism and rodent assassination squad. On Mondays, they're saviors. On Thursdays, they're Satan's interns. It really depends who's preaching and how many rats the mayor saw last week. Right now, it's Tuesday, you think, which means technically cats are neutral. a sort of furry Switzerland with claws. But you're not sure. The calendar is ink smeared and half burnt, and last week was a blur of funerals, fumigations, and soup so thin it qualified as a ghost. You gently try to shoo the tabby. It stays. You try whispering, "Nice kitty." It blinks, unimpressed. You try bribing it with a scrap of smoked turnip. It eats it and then kneads your chest like it's reviewing your worthiness. You sigh. Because here's the truth. Cats, during plague times, are both heroes and hazards. They kill rats, which carry fleas, which carry the plague. Basic cause and effect. But they're also solitary, mysterious, and difficult to baptize. All red flags for a population already on edge. Historians still argue whether cats were targeted more due to superstition or just because humans needed a scapegoat with whiskers. In some towns, they were honored. In others, burned. Occasionally both, in alternating weeks. You remember Marjorie, the spinster 3 doors down, owned 6 cats, named them all after saints. Everyone said she was harmless, if damp. Then one day, her house didn't reek of rot like everyone else's. People got suspicious. They accused her of witchcraft, said the cats whispered dark things at night, claimed her tabby was the devil in disguise. They drowned her in the river. The cats lived. 2 now roam the bakery. This one, is apparently yours. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the feline diplomat currently shedding on your chest. It leaps down and pads toward the door like it's inviting you on a quest. You follow. What choice do you have? Cats don't wait. They merely continue, and you decide whether to exist in their wake. Outside, the village is quiet, too quiet, which, as we've established, is never a good sign. You spot the chicken. She glares at the cat. The cat ignores her. Clearly, a feud is forming. You head down the alley. Cat, weaving through your legs like it's paid rent. And people notice. Old Esther points and squints. That yours? She rasps, in the tone of someone preparing a denunciation or a matchmaking suggestion. You shrug. He followed me. She spits. You'd best watch that. Looks like one of the blacksmiths. Her boy went sick last week. You nod politely, which is how you say, I'll pretend I didn't hear that ominous rumor in plague dialect. The cat climbs a wall and disappears. You return home. Halfway there, you spot a rat. It spots you. There's a long, uncomfortable silence. You stomp. It doesn't move. You grab a rock. It blinks. Then, out of nowhere, your new cat flies through the air like a furry missile and annihilates the rat. Quick, efficient, glorious. You gasp. It stares at you, licks its paw, walks away. You murmur a reverent thank you to the sky. And then it hits you. This cat may have just saved your life. Rats are the plague's Uber drivers. Kill one, you delay the ride. Kill 10, you've practically bought yourself a new immune system. But now you're stuck, because that's 2 public sightings of you and the same cat. That's enough for gossip, and gossip gets you noticed. And getting noticed gets you questioned, and being questioned in plague times is like being handed a swordfish and told to defend yourself in a court of law. You pace. Do you keep the cat? Train it in stealth rat warfare? Name it something safe like Dusty or Bread? Or do you release it and pray no one remembers? You look over. The cat is curled on your roof, tail twitching, eyes half-lidded. It knows things. It's made peace with its legend. And maybe, just maybe, you should too. You sneak a bowl of water outside. Not milk. Milk is luxury, and also theft if someone sees. Water is honest. The cat drinks, approves, stays. You go to bed that night with a new companion on the sill and 3 fewer rats in the alley. The chicken is not thrilled, but she'll adjust, because in plague times, you learn fast. You don't choose your allies. Sometimes they leap through windows, kill rats, and judge your soup. You wake up to a familiar sound, not a bell, not a scream, not even the chicken indignantly clucking at the cat for breathing too loudly. No, it's digging. Slow, rhythmic. A shovel slicing into soil that hasn't agreed to be moved. You roll out of bed, quietly, and peek through a crack in your shutter, just as you suspected. Across the street, 3 men are at it again, their spades rising and falling like a terrible lullaby. Another burial. You sigh, pull on your cloak, and immediately step into a puddle that smells like broth, mud, and probably a metaphor. You mutter a blessing to the floorboard gods and tiptoe outside. It's barely dawn, and already you feel the gravity of the day hanging heavy, like a wet sheet over your shoulders. The men dig in silence. You don't ask who it is. You never ask anymore. It's always someone. A face you knew. A voice that once said, morning, like it mattered. But something catches your eye. They're digging shallow, very shallow, which brings you to the grim and highly controversial rule number 6. Don't bury too deep. Sounds backwards, right? You'd think in times of rotting corpses and pungent everything, deeper would be better, safer, more respectful, less sniffable by dogs. But no. In this particular slice of history, the prevailing theory is that deep graves are dangerous. Historians still argue about this one. Some claim deep burial disturbed sacred layers of earth and risked offending the spirits, or worse, contaminated nearby wells. Others argue the real reason was practical. Digging is hard, time-consuming, and nobody wants to spend extra effort on someone who won't be needing their legs anymore. In your town, it's mostly about water. Too deep, and you risk piercing the underground spring. You remember that winter when they buried old Harris after a 4-day freeze. Took hours. They went too deep. A week later, everyone was sick from the well. Coincidence? Probably. Did anyone trust deep graves again? Absolutely not. Shallow graves, on the other hand, are easier, faster, and, if you're superstitious, more likely to keep the soul near enough to protect the household, but not so close that it borrows your shoes. There's also a more practical layer to this. Pun intended, people are running out of places to dig. The graveyard is full. The side alley is full. The cabbage patch? Absolutely full. And the cabbage has never been the same. So, they've begun reusing spots, lightly turning the soil, a sprinkle of lime, a whisper of prayer, and in goes the next. You hear a thunk. That's never good. The shoveler pauses, wipes his brow, and gently sets the spade aside. With hands, he brushes away dirt, murmurs something under his breath. He's hit a foot. You look away. There's etiquette for this. You wait. You do not mention the previous tenant. You do not name them. You certainly do not ask whose sock that is. Instead, you pick up a handful of dried rosemary from your pouch and toss it gently toward the grave. A small, quiet offering. It lands near the edge. One of the men nods at you. No smile, just the nod. You nod back. A woman approaches with a bundle. You recognize the blanket. Blue, with a patched corner. It belonged to a man named Johann. He once fixed carts and whistled songs with far too many verses. She lays the bundle down. Not too close, not too far. She steps back. The men stop digging. There is no priest, just one man who hums. That's enough now. No one wants to hear words. Words have started to feel fragile. Like old rope, you back away. As you walk, you pass another spot in the field, marked by a stick. No name, just a carved X. You remember when you helped dig that one. Shallow, quick. You were tired. Everyone was. The sun had set, and the lanterns were dim. You did your best. You think they would have understood. The field smells of turned soil, lime, and unresolved grief. Back home, you rinse your hands in vinegar. You light a sprig of sage. You whisper a thank you to the ground beneath your feet, because every day that the earth holds still is a day worth noticing. Later, a boy knocks on your door. He asks if you have any empty cloth. Not for clothes, for wrapping. He doesn't say who. He doesn't have to. You give him your cleanest scrap, the one you were saving. He takes it and runs. You don't watch where. That night, you lie in bed with a heavy heart and the cat curled behind your knees. You hear another shovel. Farther off, someone else preparing. You close your eyes. You try not to think about depth, about bones, about how easily the earth forgets. And still, even in dreams, you whisper the rule. Not too deep, just deep enough to let them rest. You wake with a start, heart thudding like a muffled drum. Something feels off. There's no digging, no bells, no screaming. The chicken's silent. Even the cat has disappeared, likely off judging someone else's dinner choices. Then you realize what it is. You forgot to bathe yesterday. Not that this is unusual. Bathing isn't exactly on anyone's daily to-do list, but you always follow the schedule, or rather, avoid the schedule, because today is Thursday, and rule number 7 is very clear. No baths on Thursdays. You sit up slowly, mind racing. Did you bathe yesterday? You remember washing your hands. Maybe. Or was that the vinegar rinse when you spilled soup on yourself? Either way, you almost bathed today, and that's a risk you can't afford. The superstition goes like this. Thursday is the day of exposure. Bathing opens the pores. Open pores let in the plague. And Thursday is when the bad air is strongest. Something about the moon, or the saints, or the fact that people need a scapegoat in the middle of the week. Historians still debate where this odd specificity came from. Some trace it to Roman purification rituals. Others blame it on misread religious texts or early bathhouse closures that just happened to fall on a Thursday. A few suspect it started when a bishop got sick after a particularly steamy bath on, you guessed it, a Thursday, and everyone decided the date, not the disease, was to blame. You grab your washcloth and toss it across the room. It lands with a squelch, which is its own separate problem. Your bath water, a precious bucket you heated over the fire last night, is now cold and judging you. You cover it with the cloth and murmur, tomorrow. The bucket understands. The irony, of course, is that you actually like bathing. Not in the luxurious, scented oil sort of way. You haven't seen oil since the solstice, but in the my body doesn't creak when I move sort of way. Warm water soothes the joints, lifts the mood, and temporarily masks the fact that you sleep in the same clothes you wear to funerals. But on Thursdays, no chance. Your neighbor Peter once bathed on a Thursday. He was feeling optimistic. His goat had just given birth to triplets. The sun was shining. He whistled while heating water. 2 days later, he was coughing. Coincidence? Possibly. But the village voted. He'd broken the rule. He'd invited the plague into his open, slippery pores. The goat triplets were rehomed. Peter was not. You pass his house now, empty, abandoned, faintly smelling of goats and regret. The shutters hang loose. One creaks ominously. You don't linger. Instead, you head toward the communal water trough. Not to bathe, just to stand near it, to remind yourself what you're missing. A few others are there, washing hands, rinsing spoons, avoiding eye contact. Everyone knows it's Thursday. No one speaks of it. A child dips a toe in. His mother shrieks and yanks him back like he touched molten lava. She mutters something about inviting demons and dumps salt in the water. Not much, but just enough to make a point. You walk home with your hands folded tightly in your sleeves. The day is warm and your skin itches, but you resist. It's not worth the risk. You try to distract yourself. You rearrange your herb bundles. You sweep the floor twice. You polish your one remaining spoon with a sock. The cat returns around midday, looking freshly smug and lightly dusted with ash. Probably raided someone's chimney again. You boil water, not for bathing, but for tea. Sort of. It tastes like sadness with a hint of boiled sock. Still, it passes the time. Later, you visit Martha, the herbalist with a limp and a bad attitude. She's one of the few people who scoffs at the Thursday rule. She bathes when she wants, which is often, and aggressively. Today she smells like time and rebellion. You stand outside her door. Did you bathe? You ask. Of course, she replies. I'm not letting superstition dictate my hygiene. You nod slowly. But it's Thursday. She shrugs. Exactly. No one else bathes. I get the water to myself. She has a point. But also, she has a cough. Just a little one. You take a careful step back. You return home before sunset. You boil more water. Not for bathing, of course, just to feel the steam. You let it drift over your face like a ghostly hug. Your pores sigh. You feel cleaner, safer, but still not fully clean. And that's the tension, isn't it? To bathe is to risk. To resist is to itch. And so you make peace with your filth. You tell yourself the dirt is protective, that the layers of old sweat and soot are like bark on a tree, nature's armor. You hum a tune. The cat purrs approvingly. The chicken sits on your foot like a scolding grandmother. You'll bathe tomorrow. Friday's fine. Friday is freedom. But today you stay dry. Because even in a world where rats deliver death and onions are currency, some rules are non-negotiable. No baths on Thursdays. You wake up to footsteps outside your door. Slow, cautious, hesitant. The kind of steps that say, please don't ask me to do anything heroic. You remain still, peeking through a thin slit in the shutter. It's a man, mid-30s, maybe older. Plague ages you like milk left near a fire. He's wearing the robe. You tense? It's not a plague walker's robe, too short, too clean. But it has that air of someone who's been around too much vinegar and not enough joy. On his face, the mask, the long, hooked beak mask, once white, now smudged with soot and moral ambiguity. You don't recognize him, but you do recognize what's in his hand, a plague mask. And that's where rule number 8 comes in. As urgent as it is peculiar, borrow a mask, never own one. Owning a mask in plague times is like owning 20 barrels of dried meat or a glowing complexion. It raises questions. Why do you have that? Where did you get it? Why are you so prepared? What do you know that we don't? People fear the overly equipped. If you own your own mask, you must have access to things, resources, remedies you're not sharing. And in an age where trust is thinner than your soup, being overly ready is a red flag. You remember Benedict, the local candle maker turned plague expert. He stitched a mask himself, sewed it lovingly, filled it with dried marjoram and confidence, walked through town like he was on a royal procession. 3 days later, someone accused him of sorcery, said the mask gave him visions, said he was too well. They took the mask, burned it. Benedict now lives in a cave outside the village and occasionally sends messages, by throwing rocks wrapped in notes. You've never owned a mask. You've borrowed one once. It was cracked. The lens was fogged. It smelled like soup and regret. But for 5 minutes, you wore it while helping move a neighbor's body. It wasn't heroic, just necessary. You returned it immediately after. Today, the man outside knocks once. You don't answer. He stands there a moment longer, then moves on. You let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. The mask is still in his hand, not on his face, which means it's either for rent or for sale. You shudder. Plague masks are supposed to be tools of mercy, but they've become currency. A mask costs more than food, more than chickens, more than reason. You once saw a man trade a family heirloom for one, a small silver ring passed down 3 generations, gone just like that for a beak stuffed with rose petals. He wore it for a week, then he disappeared. No one knows whether the mask failed or he just got noticed. You sit by your fire, sipping a thin broth of things you'd rather not list, and think about masks. They were meant to protect the doctors, but most of the doctors are gone. Now the masks pass from hand to hand like cursed relics, each one worn by someone who lived or didn't. You once saw a child wear one, playing pretend. She walked in circles shouting, "I am the plague," until her mother tackled her and dunked her in a barrel of vinegar. She survived, but no one lets her near fabric anymore. The cat jumps onto your lap. You scratch its head, wondering if anyone's ever made cat-sized plague masks. Probably not. They'd never wear them, and they'd charge rent. You glance toward the cupboard. Inside, wrapped in a cloth, is a nosepiece. Just the nose. The rest of the mask broke long ago, crushed under a falling beam during a house fire. You kept the beak. It's filled with mint and lies. You don't wear it. You just keep it, like a rabbit's foot, or a very pointy paperweight. You've never shown anyone. You consider tossing it, but something stops you. Maybe the faint hope that one day, if things get worse, and they always do, it might buy you a favor. A borrowed breath. The fire crackles. Outside, footsteps return. Same rhythm. You freeze. But this time, it's your neighbor, Elias. He carries a bundle. You open the door a crack. "I need the mask," he whispers. You don't ask which. You hand him the beak. No questions. He nods. He leaves. And just like that, you're maskless again. Not that you ever truly had one. Not officially. You feel lighter, vulnerable, alive. Later you hear he wore it while tending to his sister. She passed. But he didn't get sick. The mask is gone now, buried with her, which honestly is for the best, because owning one, that's dangerous. But borrowing, that's survival. You wake up scratching your ankle, your elbow, the side of your neck that always gets itchy when life feels particularly unstable, which, to be fair, is every single day now. You toss off the blanket, which is actually just a curtain you stole from the chapel ruins, swing your legs over the side of the bed, and immediately regret being alive. Not because of an existential crisis, though that's always simmering, but because of the bites. Tiny, red, raised welts. Angry little monuments to your ongoing war, with creatures smaller than your toenail. You've got fleas. Again. And that brings you to the next cruel truth in this plague-riddled existence. Rule number 9. It's not the rats you should fear, it's their passengers. Yes, rats are revolting. Yes, they chew through your grain sacks and dreams. But rats by themselves are just scruffy opportunists. It's the fleas they carry, the hopping, bloodthirsty stowaways that truly spell doom. You glance down at your ankles. 5 new bites. Impressive or tragic. You can't decide. Historians have long argued over the exact vector of plague transmission. The old theory was bad air barrow on, of course, miasma, spirits, sins, and all that. Then came the fleas. Then more debates. Was it rat fleas? Human fleas? The neighbors' suspiciously healthy goats? Regardless, in your lived experience, when the fleas arrive, people stop arriving at anything. You limp to the hearth and poke at yesterday's ashes. The chicken clucks from her corner. The cat lounges like it's been tasked with keeping the fleas emotionally stable, not gone. She lifts one paw lazily, then goes back to sleep. You briefly consider shaving your entire body. Then, you remember last winter, when Thomas tried that exact thing, claimed it would starve the fleas. He looked like a plucked goose and still itched for a month. Then he caught a cold and sneezed himself into the next village. So, no, you'll keep your hair, but you need a plan. You grab the bundle of dried herbs you stuffed into a sack labeled not food. Seriously, don't eat this again. You rub it all over your arms and legs. It smells like rosemary and disappointment, but it's worth a shot. Next, the vinegar rinse. You dip a rag in your vinegar bowl, half full, half questionable, and start dabbing every visible inch of skin. It stings, which you assume means it's working. Or you've angered the flea gods. The cat watches with bored curiosity. You hiss at her. She yawns. You change clothes. Not into anything cleaner, just different. The logic being that if the fleas have grown emotionally attached to one outfit, the abrupt switch will throw them into disarray. It probably won't, but it makes you feel proactive. You take your infested linens outside and beat them against a rock, a technique endorsed by generations of poor, itchy survivors. You mutter things under your breath as you swing, prayers, curses, one or two bad poems. You're sweating within minutes. Elias walks by. Fleas? He asks. No, you lie, still aggressively beating the cloth. Just stubborn dust. He nods, respectful. No one admits to fleas, not because of pride, but because admitting means infestation, and infestation means possible contagion, and contagion means a midnight knock and a wagon with a bell. So you lie. Everyone lies. Even the man last week who had fleas so bad he tried to trap them under wax paper. He ended up gluing his own leg hair into a brittle shell of shame. The town burned his trousers, symbolically, and also because they were flammable. You return inside, feeling only slightly less infested. Now comes the ritual. You sprinkle ashes under your bedding. You hang a sachet of garlic and nettle by the door. You wave a stick of smoldering sage in slow, spiraling patterns while chanting, "Please leave, tiny monsters. I'm already suffering enough." The chicken sneezes. You take that as a sign of approval. By late afternoon, you've scrubbed, swapped, smoked, and sobbed. Just a little. You sit on the stoop, watching the shadows grow longer. A neighbor tosses a flea-ridden tunic into the street. Two boys poke it with a stick until their mother hurls a boot at them. Fleas are the unspoken plague, the precursor, the soft opening act, before death kicks down the door and eats your cheese, and still you endure. Later, you sprinkle crushed lavender around the cat. She immediately moves to a new spot. You lie down. Try not to itch. You dream of feathers, of fur, of fleas the size of rabbits. They speak in riddles and demand tolls to cross your blanket. You wake up, still itchy, but alive. You followed the rule. You fought the unseen. And maybe, just maybe, you've won today's battle. Because in the world you inhabit, where death travels by flea-sized chariot, survival begins at the ankle. You wake up to screaming, not the blood-curdling, "my house is on fire" kind of scream, No, this one is worse. It's the bread vendor just collapsed in the square kind of scream. You shoot up, banging your head on the shelf above your bed, again, and shuffle over to the window. Three people are gathered around a figure on the ground. The bread vendor. Flour stained apron. Arms flopped out, like a failed interpretive dance move. One sandal off, definitely not a nap. You sigh and whisper today's survival mantra. Rule number 10. Avoid fresh bread. Yes, that's right. Bread. Warm, fragrant, golden brown. The food of joy. The thing that makes soup tolerable and mornings worth waking up for. Bread. Deadly. Historians still argue about the cause of certain plague flare ups tied to food. Was it contaminated flour? Infected bakers? Spiritual punishment for crust hoarding? No one knows. But in your village, the pattern is unnervingly consistent. The fresher the bread, the faster the sickness. It doesn't make sense, but nothing does anymore. You remember last month when Agnes brought home a full loaf, still warm, steam rising, like it was whispering secrets to the air. She tore it in half, gave a piece to her son. He smiled for the first time in weeks. 2 days later, they were both gone. The loaf sat untouched on the table, hardening into a cautionary tale. And yet, people still risk it. You step outside. The bread vendor, Ewan, is still on the ground. People stand around in that awkward semicircle of, should we help? Energy. No one moves, because everyone knows. It's not the falling that's the problem. It's what happens after. Ewan's basket lies tipped over beside him, loaves rolling lazily toward a puddle. One stops at your feet. You stare at it. Fresh. Perfect crust, seeds on top. The kind you used to fight pigeons for. You don't touch it. Neither does anyone else. Eventually, someone covers Ewan with a sheet and whispers a blessing. The loaves are very carefully collected using a shovel and tossed into the ash pile behind the smithy. It hurts to see good bread wasted, but survival costs more than flour these days. You walk past the square, stomach growling, and duck into the alley where the dried goods vendors hide. No one advertises food openly anymore. You have to know the knock, the wink, the oddly specific compliment to their elbow wrinkles. You find Marla behind a crate of broom handles. She raises an eyebrow. You heard? You nod. Bread again. She clicks her tongue. I keep telling people, if it's warm, it's wrong. She hands you a bundle. Hard biscuits. The kind that break teeth and taste like dust. You nod gratefully and hand her a sprig of thyme and a secret. She nods back. You walk home chewing something that was probably once flour, but now resembles sandstone. And you feel safe because hard bread can't hide sickness. It's been through too much. It's seen things. If bread had trauma, this stuff would be crying in therapy. You pass by two children crouched in the gutter, poking a soggy roll with a stick. You gently scold them. They giggle and run off. You bury the roll in dirt and mark the spot with a sad little twig. You eat the rest of your biscuit while sitting on your doorstep. The cat eyes you with judgment. You offer her a crumb. She pretends not to notice. Later, the baker's shop is boarded up. Not because it's officially closed, but because no one dares go near it now. The smell of yeast hangs in the air like an accusation. You hear someone whisper, "It's the starter. It's cursed." Someone else responds, "It's the fire. It cooks death into the dough." A third voice says, "I heard if you toast it, it's safe." You shake your head. You've heard them all. You've tried them all. Once, you even left bread out overnight to age the plague out. All that happened was the cat stole it and vomited on your bed. You learned your lesson. That night, you boil your dinner, a slurry of lentils, parsnip ends, and hope. You dip a corner of hard biscuit into the broth. It softens just enough to chew without weeping. You feel full, you feel smart, and you feel just a little bit smug because bread may once have been life. But now, stale bread is survival. You wake up to silence, which is, of course, deeply suspicious. No coughing, no clanging, no chicken related violence. Just a soft, eerie hush that settles over the village like a heavy blanket with questionable stains. You sit up, blink into the half light, and listen. Still nothing. No wind, no footsteps, not even that one guy who always mutters to himself about onions being cursed. Has he finally run out of things to mutter? Or has something else silenced him? You reach for your cloak, whisper to your cat for luck, and step outside. The air is thick, not with fog, but with tension. Like the village is collectively holding its breath. You take a step, and another, and then a whistle. A sharp, high note that cuts through the quiet like a hot knife through butter, or perhaps, more accurately, like a rusty spoon through porridge. Someone's whistling. You freeze, and then smile, because finally, someone who understands the rules. Rule number 11: whistle while you walk. Literally. Yes, it sounds ridiculous, but you've learned by now that ridiculousness is a close cousin to survival. People in your village believe whistling drives away evil spirits, or perhaps it disturbs the plague's vibrational frequency, whatever that means. More practically, whistling warns others that you're nearby and that you're currently breathing, not wheezing, not hacking, not suspiciously silent. Historians still argue about the origins of this strange practice. Some believe it dates back to ancient labor songs. Others think it emerged during the first wave of the plague when people realized that silence bred fear, but music, however bad, bred community. The theory? If you can whistle, you must not be dying, and that's enough. You purse your lips and let out a tentative note. It wobbles. Your lips are dry, and honestly, you've never been musically gifted. But you manage a short tune, something between a lullaby and a hiccup, and continue down the path. Immediately, a head pokes out from a window. Morning, says a voice. You nod. They whistle back, a two-note trill, and disappear. The code is clear. Alive, alert, no visible pustules. You keep whistling. Down the alley, around the corner, past the cabbage cart that's now a shrine to the late cabbage man, R.I.P. probably. Each tune is different, improvised. One mimics the sound of your stomach grumbling. Another is an attempt at a bird call that causes actual birds to fly away in fear. You pause at a fork in the path. Left leads to the square. Right leads to the well. Someone whistles from the square. You choose the well, because here's the catch. Whistling can be faked. Last week, a boy named Oren learned to mimic bird calls so perfectly he fooled 3 households into thinking he was an especially musical sparrow. They left food. He left thank you notes. It was adorable. Until someone whistled his exact tune and collapsed 10 minutes later. Now, the village listens for authenticity. Too polished? Suspicious. Too sloppy? Maybe sick. Off-key but enthusiastic? Safe. As you fill your bucket with questionable water, you hum a little melody, half nursery rhyme, half personal anthem. A woman nearby taps the rhythm on her leg. You tap back. It's music, it's medicine, it's noise. You return home whistling a triumphant tune about soup. The chicken looks unimpressed. The cat, perched dramatically on the sill like a plague-era gargoyle, gives you a slow blink of approval. You take off your boots and sit by the hearth. You boil the water, add a sad onion, maybe a sadder beet. The smell isn't great, but your whistling makes it almost palatable. You don't talk much anymore. Conversation feels risky. But whistling? It's safe. It's a lifeline. It's your version of a status update. Later that evening, just as the sky turns gray, you hear it. Someone, far off, is whistling the melody you invented this morning. The one about soup, you smile because someone else is alive. Someone else heard you. And in this world where whispers bring rumors and silence brings death, that one high, wobbly tune says more than any sermon ever could. So you whistle back, badly, loudly, joyfully, and hope it carries. You wake up already suspicious. It's not the light or the smell of your cat's breath, which is frankly its own kind of medieval horror. No, it's the weight. Something's heavier than usual. You shift under the blanket-turned burlap duvet and hear a crunch. You freeze. Crunches are never good in bed, especially not in plague times. You slowly reach down and pull out a small, flattened pouch tied with twine and reeking of rosemary, sage, and something vaguely licorice-like. You'd forgotten about that. It's your herb bundle, stuffed there a week ago in a fit of pre-bedtime panic. Because, according to rule number 12, if you don't hide your herbs well, you're going to get arrested or robbed, possibly both. Yes, we're talking about contraband plants. See, herbs aren't just seasoning in your world. They're survival. They're medicine, protection, reputation, currency. In some quarters, they're as good as gold, or at least as good as goat milk, which is practically the same thing during a pandemic. But you can't just walk around smelling like rosemary and good decisions. That's how people know you have it. And when people know, they want it. And when they want it, well, things go poorly for you. Hence the rule. Smuggle herbs in your undergarments. And not just any herbs. You want the holy trinity of plague prevention? Lavender keeps bad air and worse people away. Sage wards off spirits, uninvited house guests, and occasionally chickens. Rosemary protection, flavor, and a smell strong enough to mask whatever the cat dragged in. Historians still argue whether these herbs were truly effective or just aromatic theater. But one thing is certain, they gave people something, a ritual, a hope, a distraction, and in the plague years, that was enough. You stand and fish around for your backup pouch, the real one, the one you keep hidden in the lining of your cloak, stitched carefully so it looks like part of the ragged design. Inside, 6 dried sprigs, crushed bay leaf, a suspiciously fuzzy clove, and a single perfect mint leaf. You whisper a quick apology to the mint. It's too valuable to use just yet, and tuck everything back in place. You remember the time Marta got caught with a bundle of thyme braided into her hair. Very chic, very fragrant, very dumb. The guards claimed she was hoarding remedies and casting spells with her scalp. They shaved her head and took the herbs. She wears a hat now, made of straw, with a vengeance. So now you carry yours discreetly, in your boot heel, in the hem of your sleeve, and yes, in your undergarments. It's not comfortable, but neither is dying. You step outside. Immediately, you see a man sniffing the air suspiciously. You clench. You know that look. He's on the hunt. Not for food, for scent. You pivot. Casual-like. Pretend to adjust your belt. Tug your tunic down just enough to trap the scent. Keep walking. A child runs past, trailing what might be basil. You hope it's not. That would be a waste. Basil's only good fresh. And no one's had fresh anything since that unfortunate lettuce incident. You pass the baker's boarded shop and duck into the alley. There, behind the broken barrel, is Nora. She lifts her cloak. Don't panic, this is normal. She reveals a small stash of herbs tied in little bundles like adorable, desperate bouquets. She's the herb smuggler now. Has been since the apothecary fled. You trade her a scrap of garlic cloth for 2 sprigs of wormwood and a thimble of powdered sage. I keep it close, she whispers. Always do, you reply. You tuck it under your arm, deep into the lining of your shirt, pressing it flat with the practiced ease of someone who once hid an entire onion under their armpit for 2 days. Desperate times. Don't ask. You make it home without incident. The cat sniffs you and sneezes. You take that as a compliment. You boil a small pot of water and toss in a hint of the wormwood. It stinks gloriously. The steam fills the air, drifting toward the rafters like incense in a temple of desperation. You sit by the fire, inhale deeply, and feel something close to peace. For now, because you know the danger isn't over, people are still suspicious of smells. They associate good scents with hoarding. They believe herbs should be shared, or surrendered, or burned as potential magic. So you live in the middle, scented, but not too scented, prepared, but not obviously, protected, but quietly. Because that's how plague survivors thrive. You smell like nothing until it counts. You wake up to the sound of paper rustling, which is strange because you haven't owned real paper in months. Parchment, maybe. Bark scraps, a bit of flattened cabbage leaf used once to send a love note that turned into a mildew warning. You roll over, squinting toward the window. A notice, posted right on your door. You don't have to read it to know what it says. They've been posting them all week. You sigh. Because this brings you face to face with rule number 13, never volunteer. Not for anything. Not ever. You step outside, peel the notice from your door. The ink is smug and still slightly wet. To all healthy citizens, it reads, a lie already. The Council of Recovery and Public Order, CRAPO for short, yes, someone approved that, is seeking volunteers for essential tasks. Body removal, street sweeping, rat disposal, and community singing. You laugh. A sharp, involuntary snort. Community singing? Last time they tried that, a baritone sneezed mid-verse and took out a whole tenor section. You crumple the notice and stuff it in your fire bin. The thing is, people who volunteer tend to fall into one of 2 categories. The selfless and brave, dead by next Tuesday. The secretly desperate for extra rations, missing by next Tuesday. You are neither. You are what historians might generously call plague neutral. You don't rock the boat. You don't get on the boat. You wave at the boat from a distance while quietly reinforcing your house with bundles of garlic and sheer denial. But the council is getting pushy. Last week, Elias said no to an opportunity to help sanitize the livestock pen. The next day, he found his door painted with a symbol, a red circle with a line through it. No one spoke to him for 3 days. Even the chicken avoided his yard. So you do what all reasonable people do when faced with a moral conundrum. You fake an injury. You limp dramatically when outside, wrap a cloth around your wrist like it's sprained. You wince a lot, mutter things about tendon ghosts and old monastery wounds. Nobody questions it. Everyone has their own injuries to fake. Your neighbor Greta has worn the same neck brace since spring. She once confessed it was made of cabbage stems and mashed bread. Convincing, though. A boy down the street carries a crutch, but his limp switches legs depending on the day. You nod at each other. Mutual respect. Avoiding volunteering is both art and science. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of medieval community health efforts. Some towns organized shifts. Others burned half the village and hoped for the best. But the reality is this. The ones who stepped forward often didn't step back. It's not that you're heartless. You just don't want to join the ever-growing choir of plague martyrs. You remember Simon, the fishmonger, who volunteered to transport supplies to the southern gate. A noble task. 3 hours later, someone sneezed on his donkey. He returned pale, silent, and smelling faintly of despair. 2 days later, gone. No one eats fish now, not out of fear. It's just, without Simon, it's too much work. You sit by your fire and craft today's excuse in case someone knocks. Fever. Too obvious. Hallucinations. Risky. Could get you blessed. Spiritual fasting. Trendy, but also invites monks. You settle on, I'm hosting a rat funeral. Very solemn. Can't leave. Perfect. The knock never comes. Still, you keep your limp consistent, just in case someone's watching. You groan loudly when lifting a kettle. You squint into the middle distance like you're remembering a painful loss. Your imaginary injured wrist, perhaps. The cat is thoroughly unimpressed. Later that night, another notice goes up. This one's painted on the village wall. Volunteers receive extra broth. You raise an eyebrow. How much broth? No? Focus? That's how they get you. They dangle the broth. You agree. Next thing you know, you're scrubbing alleyways with vinegar while your immune system files a resignation letter. You reinforce your door with a second latch. Not for protection, just so it makes a louder click. The sound of boundaries. You lie down. The cat curls beside your feet. You feel a flicker of guilt. Maybe you should help more. Be brave. Contribute. But then you remember, bravery is a luxury in times like these. Survival is the goal. And sometimes, that means saying no with conviction and a really dramatic limp. So you whisper your rule to the shadows. Never volunteer. And sleep the sleep of the very reasonably cautious. You wake up to the sound of chanting, which is a bad sign. No one chants during good news. No one ever says, "We found more potatoes," followed by a dramatic Gregorian hum in the town square. You sit up, the cat immediately abandoning your lap with a grunt of protest. Outside, the low drone of voices pulses like a headache on the wind. You already know what this means. A procession. And that brings us to rule number 14. Never join a procession. Ever. Not even the nice ones. You peek through a crack in the shutter. Figures in gray cloaks move slowly through the village. Some barefoot, some dragging lengths of chain behind them, because apparently walking wasn't dramatic enough. They swing incense burners like they're trying to smoke out sin itself. One is playing a tiny bell. Ding, ding, pause, ding. You feel like your soul is being tapped on the shoulder. The thing about processions, especially plague processions, is that they are less about prayer and more about spectacle management. If people are moving in unison, they're less likely to panic or loot or notice that their neighbor, Gerald, has been suspiciously quiet for 3 days. Historians still debate whether these ritual marches helped morale or simply redistributed germs more efficiently. Either way, your opinion is clear. They're plague parades, and you're not buying a ticket. You hear a chant rise. "O Lord, spare us, we who crawl." You immediately close the shutter, because here's what happens if you join. You inhale 17 kinds of ash, spice, and vague guilt. Someone gives you a candle that burns at least one finger. You end up singing in a key you didn't know existed, surrounded by people who believe the louder they chant, the less likely they are to die. You made that mistake once. The forgiveness. Procession of early April. You remember the robes, the weirdly damp hand-holding, the woman next to you weeping so hard she shorted out the lantern she was carrying. 2 days later, half the chanters were sick. You never forgave April. Today's procession is especially grim. No crosses, no icons, no saint banners. Just people in gray, holding herbs and muttering prayers like they're trying to cast a group spell. The bell dings again. You sigh and head to the back room, where you keep the do not engage supplies. Stale bread, for looking busy chewing. A broken rosary, for dramatic clutching when people pass, a fake cough for making others walk faster. You grab the bread and head to the doorstep, sitting casually with the rosary in hand and your expression set to haunted but unavailable. The procession comes closer. Someone looks at you. You chew very slowly, blink once, whisper suffering, just loud enough to be cryptic. They keep walking. One woman wails as she passes. Another throws dried rose petals. You're not sure where she found them. Everything floral has been eaten, burned, or turned into questionable bathwater. A child waves a twig. You nod solemnly. Inside, you scream, "Do not offer me that twig. Please." They pass. The air stinks of smoke, vinegar, and mild desperation. You survive the encounter. Once the tail end of the line shuffles by, you go back inside, lock the door, and spray a protective mist of boiled bay leaf water into the air. The cat sneezes twice and looks personally offended. Later that evening, you hear drums. Someone started a second procession, this one singing a tune that sounds suspiciously like "We All Fall Down," which is on the nose. You whisper to yourself, "Nope," and duck under your blanket, clutching the cat like an unwilling teddy bear. You do not chant. You do not march. You do not wave branches like you're trying to signal passing angels. Because you know this: every minute spent in a procession is a minute spent rubbing shoulders, exchanging breath, and accidentally catching the plague off someone's overenthusiastic incense swing. Better to stay home. Better to hum softly to your stew. Better to live quietly and long than die loudly with a bell around your neck. So you lie back. Let the chants fade and mutter your personal hymn. I don't process. I don't participate. I don't perish. You wake up to a familiar stench. It's not death. Not quite. It's the smell of too much optimism rotting in the sun. You know that scent. Sweet, sour, slightly floral. Like someone tried to mask despair with rosewater and failed spectacularly. You sniff the air again. Someone's opened their windows, which means someone's trying to entertain guests. You roll over and groan into your straw pillow. The plague has taken a lot from this village: family, bread, dignity, but somehow it hasn't killed everyone's need to host. And so, with a resigned sigh, you shuffle to your window and spy across the alley. There it is, table, two chairs, cloth covering the worst of the wood rot, a jug of something that probably started life as wine but now dreams of becoming vinegar. Guests, which leads you to rule number 15. Don't accept invitations. Don't extend them. Hospitality is a trap. You've seen it too many times. A neighbor throws a modest little gathering, just a get together. Just 5 people, no symptoms, all blessed by the friar. 3 days later, someone's coughing, someone's vanished. Someone else is praying over a loaf of burnt barley bread like it's their last rites. Historians still debate how much socializing contributed to the spread of the plague. But in your village, it's not a debate, it's a pattern. Every party is a funeral waiting to happen. You sit at your own empty table and consider your options. On one hand, you're lonely. Everyone is. Talking to the cat only gets you so far, especially since she's recently developed a disturbing tendency to judge your stew. But on the other hand, you like breathing. And more importantly, you like breathing without bleeding. So you keep to yourself. You make it look like you're open to visits, though. That's key. You leave out an extra cup. You hang a cleanish cloth in the window, just in case anyone's keeping tabs. It's not deceit, it's diplomacy. Because refusing guests too aggressively invites suspicion. And suspicion is the second most contagious thing around here, right after fleas. Your neighbor Elias once built a tiny gate across his doorway, painted "No Entry" in charcoal. The next week, someone reported him for heretical solitude. The friar made him Host a candlelit prayer supper. 10 guests. 8 outcomes you'd rather not discuss. You open your door and set a wooden bowl outside, empty, but carved with decorative flourishes. It says, I would have you in, but alas, I'm just barely surviving. It's the polite way to lie. You take a turn around the garden patch. The weeds are thriving. You consider eating one just for variety. The thought passes. From down the lane, a voice calls, You coming to Marta's tonight? You freeze. It's an ambush. Social invitations are never offered. They're deployed. You turn, smile, nod vaguely. If the wind favors me, you say. It means nothing. It's perfect. The voice chuckles and moves on. You won't be going. You've learned. Last time you said yes, you brought your own cup, your own spoon, your own chair. You sat 6 feet from everyone and refused to touch the bread. Still, the next day, you woke up with a sniffle and enough paranoia to sanitize your chicken. You take your own advice now. Decline every offer. Share nothing but gestures. If someone says, Come inside, you say, I've already eaten. Even if you're chewing on regret, you've developed a dozen ways to bow out. My door won't close properly. Draft risk. My aunt's ghost visits on Thursdays. She hates guests. I'm fasting to confuse the spirits. I'm blessed with solitude today. Each excuse earns a nod of understanding. Everyone gets it, because truthfully, everyone's a little scared. But they hide it behind hospitality, behind fruitless attempts to pretend this is all normal. You're not fooled. Later, as dusk falls, you watch the gathering begin. 3 neighbors, a table, laughter that sounds a little too loud, too forced. Someone toasts to survival. You shut your shutters. You light a small lamp and drink your broth alone. The cat curls beside you, likely because your lap is warm and your cooking has improved slightly since the last incident with the mint. You whisper a thank you to the silence, to the absence of risk, to the absence of guests, because tonight your bowl is empty, your room is quiet, and your heart, though lonely, is still beating. And that's all the feast you need. Hospitality can wait, survival can't. You wake up to the unmistakable sound of metal scraping wood, which is either someone sharpening a blade or someone trying to break into a cupboard that isn't theirs. You grab the nearest weapon-like object, your spoon, and tiptoe to the door. It's neither. It's Greta. Again. She's trying to bar her windows with a frying pan and what looks like a chair leg. You tap on the frame. She jumps and nearly swats you with a piece of salted fish. Don't do that, she hisses. Do you want to get accused? And just like that, you remember today's rule. Rule number 16. Never be the last one without a scapegoat. You sigh. Not because you don't believe in collective blame. Of course you do. This is medieval plague logic. But because you'd really hoped today wouldn't involve any accusations. But here we are. See? The plague doesn't just bring disease. It brings suspicion, and suspicion demands a direction. Someone to point at. Someone to whisper about. Historians still argue over whether fear or famine drove communities to turn on each other so often during outbreaks. Witch trials, healer banishments, mysterious drownings in the duck pond. The records blur fact and fable, but the pattern remains. When people are scared, they need someone to blame. And you are very careful not to make that someone you. You help Greta lift the chair leg higher. It doesn't do anything, but the gesture matters. You hear about old Bran? She whispers. You nod grimly. Everyone heard about Bran. 3 days ago, his garden thrived a little too much. Suspiciously green beans, unseasonal tomatoes, a single enormous turnip that drew a crowd. Yesterday, his house was burned. The turnip got stomped. No one knows where he went. Probably to the woods. Probably with a new turnip-based identity. You pull Greta inside and shut the door. Who's it going to be next? She asks. You both know the answer. It's whoever doesn't deflect fast enough. That's the rule. If you don't plant the seed of doubt in someone else's garden, it will get planted in yours. It's horrible, unfair, exhausting, but also kind of organized. You remember when the plague first hit? Everyone banded together, helped each other, shared vinegar, lent spoons, even rotated watch shifts. Then came the second wave, then the fear, then the accusations. You were nearly blamed once, all because your cat coughed. People said it was an omen, that animals carried messages from the underworld, that your eyes were too quiet, whatever that means. So you acted quickly. You spread a rumor that Marta's parsnip soup was unusually creamy. People asked what she used. You shrugged. Could be goat's milk. Could be something else. That night, Marta had to boil every pot in her house while chanting psalms. You weren't proud of it, but you weren't dead either. Greta paces while you tend to your herb pouch. It's a good one today, mostly sage, with a hint of crushed dried plum leaf. Not magical, but enough to make you smell like someone who's obviously too broke to be dangerous. You hand Greta a bundle. She clutches it like a relic. Across the alley, a man you don't know well walks by. His cloak is new, clean, suspicious. You exchange looks with Greta. She raises one eyebrow. You both shrug. The seed is planted. He'll be fine. Probably. Unless he also has beans growing out of season. You step outside, careful not to look too composed. The trick is to appear mildly inconvenienced at all times. Plague doesn't like people who look too ready. You sweep your doorstep. You curse mildly at your broom. You scowl at the sky, then soften it with a small sigh. A performance, really. You've become an actor in a tragedy where the only reward is not getting blamed in Act 3. Down the road, you see someone eyeing you. You quickly pretend to sneeze. Then murmur, "Oh no," loud enough to be heard, but not loud enough to confirm. The watcher turns away instantly. You're safe. For now. That night, you eat plain gruel with just a whisper of salt. The cat paws at your foot. You whisper to her, "You know, you're the only one who hasn't accused anyone." She blinks, sincere, indifferent. You smile. The moon is high when the knock comes. You freeze. Then you hear it, a neighbor asking if anyone saw the man with the cloak. The clean one. You shake your head. Offer no names, no theories. But you know Greta's already talking. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, someone else will be the reason for everything. Not you. Not tonight. Because in the grim ledger of plague survivors, there's a rule etched deeper than any scripture. It's better to be quiet than righteous, better paranoid than pure, and always, always have a scapegoat. You wake up sweating, but not from a fever. At least you hope not. No, this is the sweat of paranoia. You've had the dream again. The one where someone knocks at your door, you open it, and they hand you a mysterious parcel labeled "For the Village." Inside, a chicken feather, a jawbone, and a scroll that just says, "It's your turn now." You sit up. You need air. The cat, curled like a judgmental donut at your feet, doesn't move. Outside, the air is thick with humidity and vague mistrust. You pull your cloak tight, not because it's cold, but because your tunic has holes in places that would be frowned upon by polite society. Not that polite society exists anymore. They left with the traveling musicians. You walk past the chapel ruins and make your way toward the village fountain, such as it is. A cracked basin that occasionally burps up water like an elderly man trying to remember soup. Someone's left a jug beside it, unattended, unlabeled. You stop. This is where Rule 17 kicks in. Never trust free supplies, especially if they come in baskets. You know the type. A kind soul, always anonymous, always suspicious, leaves food, water, herbs, or little cloth dolls outside for the good of the community. Historically very sweet. In plague times, highly questionable. Historians still debate whether charity helped stem the panic or just created more avenues for contamination. And in your experience, it's a toss up. Sometimes a free jar of honey saves a life. Other times, someone drinks from a public cup and suddenly everyone has opinions about demons. You crouch beside the jug, sniff it. Water, maybe. You think you smell rosemary. But that could also be fear. A few days ago, someone left a basket of boiled eggs on a bench. No note, no context, just eggs. Two villagers took one each. One is fine. The other insists she can hear birds speaking Latin now. No one knows which egg was the problem, or if it was the eggs at all. But they burned the basket. You walk away from the jug. You're thirsty, sure, but you're not that thirsty. Instead, you reach into your pouch and chew on a stale root. It tastes like regret and old paper, but it keeps your mouth wet enough to think clearly. That's what matters. You remember when Nora found that bundle of apples under her doorstep, bright red, untouched by insects, practically glowing. Her eyes lit up like it was her birthday. Then she paused and waited. 3 hours passed. She finally gave one to the goat. The goat is fine. Nora isn't. Not because of the apples, just because she ate 5 of them, and her stomach wasn't ready for joy. You learned your lesson, watching her writhe in sugar-induced agony. Free is a dangerous word. In a plague, everything has a cost. You keep moving, nodding at a boy stacking firewood in the shape of a horse. Possibly symbolic, possibly just boredom. He offers you a slice of something. You shake your head, tapping your stomach. Fasting, you say. Always a safe excuse. Spiritually impressive, dietarily vague. He nods, pops the slice in his own mouth, and shrugs. It smells like carrots. You want a carrot, but not that carrot. Later that day, someone leaves dried herbs hanging from a tree branch near the well. Carefully tied, beautifully bundled. Looks like a charm. You admire it from a distance. Others do too. No one touches it. The next morning, it's gone. No one talks about it. Maybe it healed someone. Maybe it cursed them. Maybe the wind just took it. You'll never know. That's the trick with plague charity. It comes with no receipts, no guarantees, and a lingering fear that you're just a few bites away from joining the village coughing choir. So you take no gifts. You leave no gifts. You share only what you can account for. Words, gestures, a few dried lentils. You're pretty sure won't summon anything. That night, you hang your own food pouch from a ceiling beam. Not to keep it safe, but to remind yourself that everything you eat, you chose. You boil your roots, sprinkle in salt dust from the bottom of an old shoe-shaped jar, and eat alone. The cat eyes you. You offer her a piece. She turns away. Even she doesn't trust leftovers, and she licks her own toes. You go to bed with a growling stomach, but a calm mind, because while free gifts might be tempting, they also come with invisible strings, strange smells, and the occasional unsolicited hallucination. So you sleep soundly, knowing your food was old, ugly, and entirely yours. Trust what you can trace. Eat what you can curse. And never ever trust a basket. You wake up with the sun in your eyes and mud on your floor, which is odd because you distinctly remember not inviting either of those things inside. You sit up, stretch, step in the mud, immediately regret stretching. Someone's been here. You glance around. No signs of theft, no overturned chairs. No plague was here, scrawled in ash across the wall. But there, on your rickety old stool, is a pair of shoes. Not yours. Not even your size. Small. Neat. With laces made of braided fiber and soles that actually match. which means only one thing: a healer has visited. And so we arrive at Rule 18. Don't offend the healers, but don't trust them completely either. You pick up the shoes and sniff them. Herbal, hints of yarrow and vinegar, possibly thyme, possibly something that should never be near feet. Historians still debate the true role of medieval plague healers: saints, charlatans, delusional herbal enthusiasts with a flair for performance. No one can agree, probably because some were all three at once. Your local healer is named Wren. She appears suddenly, leaves quietly, speaks in riddles, owns 17 scarves, wears all of them simultaneously. She once cured a boy's cough by tying leeks to his ankles. He stopped coughing. He also moved to the next village and became a carpenter. You walk outside and see it, the faint chalk symbol drawn on your doorpost, a triangle with dots, maybe a warning, maybe a blessing, maybe just modern art for plague times. You don't erase it, because that's Rule 18b. If a healer draws on your house, don't touch it, even if it's rude, even if it drips. Just don't. You nod to a passing woman who's dragging a bucket full of what looks like lizard tails. She eyes your door symbol, raises her eyebrows, then nods with admiration. Social status restored. The thing about healers is everyone needs them, but no one wants to owe them. So you do what people have always done. You pretend you didn't notice their visit. You leave a dried apple slice on the sill. Not an offering, obviously. Just forgotten fruit. If she happens to take it, all the better. You sweep the mud into a neat little pile. Collect some for your rainwater filtration project, which is mostly just you pouring water through old linen and whispering at it. You remember the time Wren cures Greta's insomnia by making her sleep inside a circle of potatoes. It worked. But also, Greta has had a strong aversion to root vegetables ever since. You remember when Elias asked her for help with his skin rash. She smeared him with honey, covered him in feathers, and told him not to speak for 24 hours. It didn't work, but he was very popular with birds that week. You trust Wren cautiously. She once warned you about a bad dream before you had it, but she also insists that plums cause moral decay. You decide to keep the shoes. You try them on. They fit, which is alarming. You wear them as you do chores. You feel slightly safer, slightly lighter. Like maybe the mud on your floor came from someone who knows something. Later, you hear that Marta's cousin's healer gave someone wormwood in the wrong dosage, and now they believe they're a medieval poet named Thistle. They speak only in rhyme, which is adorable, until they start prophesying kitchen fires. So you're careful. You drink your own broth, burn your own herbs, but you keep the shoes. At twilight, Wren appears in the lane, just a flicker of scarves, a glint of something shiny. She nods at your door. You nod back. That's it. That's the whole transaction. You sleep better that night. Is it the shoes? Is it placebo? Is it quiet fear dressed up as faith? Doesn't matter. You don't cough. You don't itch. And when you wake, the mud is gone. Just a little ash in its place. A trace of a footprint leading toward the woods. No words. No warning. Just quiet help from someone who isn't always right, but isn't always wrong either. So you whisper your thanks to the healer, to the shoes, to the strange magic of half answers and wholehearted effort, because in a plague, you trust cautiously, but you don't turn away help when it wears 17 scarves. You wake up to singing, soft, off-key, unsettling. It's not coming from your house. Thank the saints. It's coming from the road. You peek through a slit in your shutter, and there they are, 5 of them, draped in mismatched cloaks, faces painted with ash and berry juice, carrying bundles of sticks, bells, and is that a goose? It is. They're the wanderers, which means it's time to remember Rule 19. Avoid traveling performers, especially if they claim they're blessed. You groan. The wanderers are plague pilgrims of a sort. They drift from village to village, offering a mix of prophecy, performance, and well intentioned hysteria. And yes, sometimes they bring news, but mostly they bring goose feathers, unsolicited wisdom, and a lingering smell of roasted turnips. Historians still debate the role of these groups in medieval disease control. Were they cultural lifelines, or just walking plumes of bacteria with tambourines? The records are mixed, probably because no one wanted to write down, "I caught the plague from a guy doing cartwheels while reciting psalms." You pull on your cloak and step outside, pretending to sweep while subtly watching the road. They're dancing now. One bangs two spoons together while hopping on one foot. Another hands out wilted flowers. A third waves the goose like it's a divine relic. The goose seems unconvinced. They chant as they go, "Flee from sin and wash your feet, eat no figs, and skip the meat." Catchy, nonsensical. You consider hiding, but that would be rude and suspicious. And honestly, you're curious. So you do what you always do when faced with mystery in plague times. You feign mild reverence and ask no follow up questions. The wanderers reach your door. One stops and hands you a paper talisman, a drawing of a tree, a star, and what might be a goat doing yoga. You nod solemnly. The goose stares at you with quiet judgment. "Are you righteous?" asks one of the performers, a woman with bells tied to every visible limb. You smile. "I'm moderately righteous," you reply. She nods as if this is a perfectly acceptable answer and dances on. You exhale. Survived. For now. You watch them make their way through the village. They offer blessings, odd ointments, and riddles. Some villagers accept them. Others close shutters and pretend to be furniture. One man accepts a blessing and immediately trips over a bucket. Someone whispers, "See? Purified." You walk back inside, unfold the paper talisman, and tape it to the wall with a bit of dried honey. Not because you believe in it, but because removing it would feel like tempting fate with a bullhorn. You boil water for tea. Add a pinch of suspicious bark. It tastes like regret and peppermint. You try to remember what the last group of wanderers said. Something about how the moon had teeth and cabbage was secretly unholy. You still eat cabbage. So far, no consequences. You've heard of villages turning away the wanderers, chasing them out with pitchforks and angry goats. But then those villages end up with mysteriously wilted crops, or strange dreams, or an outbreak of toe fungus that no one can explain. So now people tolerate the chaos because plague logic is part science, part rumor, and part insurance policy. The performers pass by again, heading toward the forest path. One throws a handful of flour into the air. It catches the sunlight. For a moment, it looks almost magical. Then someone sneezes. The spell is broken. You spend the afternoon rearranging your pantry. You find a dried beet shaped like the Virgin Mary. You consider selling it. Then you remember no one has coins anymore, just trade items and weirdly specific favors. You place it near the window, not as an idol, more like a conversation piece. At dusk, the singing fades, silence returns. The goose honks once, a farewell, or possibly an insult, and then they're gone. You breathe easier, you sleep better. But you leave the talisman on the wall, because maybe, just maybe, that goat doing yoga is watching over you. Or maybe you've just lost your grip on normality. Either way, in plague times, all guests are suspect. But the singing ones with geese, they're in a league of their own. You wake up to silence again. But this time it's a calm silence. No chanting, no distant wailing, no unexpected geese, just the gentle creak of old beams and the faint rustle of wind through your rags. Once curtains. You stay in bed a little longer this morning. Why not? You followed the rules. You've survived the soup, the sage, the social traps, and the spontaneous street processions. You've deflected accusations with the grace of a sarcastic squirrel and avoided plague baskets like they were cursed coupons. Which brings us finally to the last rule. Rule 20. Do not assume it's over. Not ever. This is the quietest it's been in weeks, maybe months. The streets outside aren't bustling, but they're not empty either. You hear someone sweeping. Another person is arguing gently with their goat. It almost feels normal. And that's what makes it dangerous. Because nothing lures a survivor into complacency faster than a hint of routine. Historians continue to debate the concept of plague tapering. Did it end naturally? Did it burn itself out? Did people just get used to it? The answer may be all three, and none. You get up and wash your face with tepid water from your emergency ladle. You pat your cheeks dry with a cloth you may have once used for soup, but now call a towel. Branding is everything. Breakfast is sparse. One crust of bread, half a roasted root, a pinch of salt you've hidden in an empty coin pouch under your bed. You eat it slowly, like royalty, because in plague times, survival is its own kind of feast. You step outside. It's market day, technically, which now means 3 people with crates and 1 old woman yelling at a pumpkin. You smile politely at each vendor. Don't linger. Don't comment. Don't engage in anything that might be considered festive, because joy, like singing pilgrims, attracts attention. And attention is still a liability. You purchase a single beet using a trade voucher carved into dried pasta. It's a good trade. You nod. No handshakes. Just mutual acknowledgement of the absurdity of this new economy. On your way home, you pass a group of children playing Catch the Rat. It's less horrifying than it sounds. The rat is fake. Probably. They're laughing. You allow yourself to laugh too, but only once. You check your house for symbols, herbs, unexpected mud. Nothing new. Even the cat seems relaxed. She's made a nest out of your cleanest shirt and 1 suspicious shoe. You let her keep it. You tidy the hearth, adjust your talisman, and rehang your occupied cloth in the window. Not because anyone's likely to visit, but because rituals matter. Rituals keep you sharp. They remind you that just because death isn't here right now doesn't mean it's gone. Later, you sit at your window and sip tea made from the last of your dried mint. You reflect on the rules, not the official ones. Your rules. The ones that kept you safe. Never whistle without a reason. Never trust a basket, a visitor, or a goat with secrets. Always pretend to fast. Only sing when absolutely alone or delirious. And above all, never assume it's over. The sun sets. You close the shutters. You lock the door with a double wrap of twine that once held a monk's hamstring in place. Don't ask. You sit by the fire. The cat sighs. You exhale. For now, you are safe. But tomorrow, who knows? Maybe the plague will return with new tricks. Maybe a different illness will roll in like a fog. Maybe you'll finally run out of root vegetables and have to barter with your last real secret, your ability to knit. But tonight you've done everything right, and that's enough. So you lay down. You nestle under the weight of your patched quilt and your quiet paranoia. You stare at the ceiling beams and trace the cracks like constellations. You whisper the rules to yourself like a prayer, not to remember them, but to honor them, because they've kept you here, alive, tired, still breathing, and maybe, just maybe, there will come a time when you don't need the rules anymore. But until then, You keep them close as your herbs, as close as your goat related grudges, as close as sleep. The fire is low now. A soft amber glow flickers across the floor, catching the edges of your worn shoes, your bundled herbs, the small bowl you forgot to wash. The night deepens. Outside, the world breathes slower. The wind has quieted. Even the usual creaks of the rafters have gone still, like the house itself is resting. You lie there, the blanket warm and heavy across your chest, the air holding just the faintest scent of mint and wood smoke. Your thoughts drift, gently, aimlessly, like smoke curling toward the ceiling. Maybe tomorrow will bring change, maybe not. Either way, you've made it this far, and that's no small thing. You listen to the steady rhythm of your breath, the subtle tick of the cooling walls. The cat shifts slightly, then settles again, a contented weight against your feet. The danger isn't gone, but for now, it's far enough away that you can close your eyes without flinching. You've survived soup shortages, candlelit paranoia, whispered accusations, singing geese, and at least one ill-advised street performance involving a turnip and interpretive dance. You're still here, still whole, still you. So let your shoulders relax. Let the weight of the day fall off, one heartbeat at a time. Let your mind slow to a soft hum and sleep. Sleep, knowing that the rules are in place, that your feet are warm, that the fire is kind, that even in the strangest times, there is peace in simply being. And if you dream, may it be of a world where the soup is always hot, the herbs never run out, and no one ever knocks unless they bring bread. Sweet dreams, Plague Survivor. You've earned them. End of script.